The following is a production of UNO Television for KYNE TV. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome to UNO. Consider this, UFOs are real. Well, if you believe that, or at least think they're very possible, you're in the growing number of people in this country. Statistics show from the surveys that are taken that, I don't know if it's Star Trek or X-Files, but most of you are at least willing to believe it's a possibility. Well, my guests here think it's more than a possibility. With me today, and I'm pleased to have them, are John Foster. He's a retired engineer and a lifelong UFO contactee. I'll think about that for a minute while I introduce Dr. Jack Kasher. He is a professor of physics at UNO, and he's a believer from a scientific sense, in fact, and we'll go into that a little bit throughout the show. I think I've never met a contactee.
Oh, you haven't?
Never, you know, I've read about it, I've heard media. Before we get into detail, there are, by your count, by your personal knowledge and anecdotes, there are more than just you around.
There are,
in this, you know.
yes, right in eastern Nebraska, there are what I would say are many people that have had.
Well, you're a very hot topic. People like you right now.
We are.
And people like Jack, who are analyzing video, NASA video regarding one thing or another.
That's
Most
right.
recently Mars, although that's not your particular bag.
Yeah, that's another issue, but yeah, that's right. We're getting more and more videotapes so we can analyze them scientifically, and that part of it is really starting to grow.
The reason, and we'll go over this later, that they bring this up is that there is a UFO Contact and You open forum a week from Saturday the 25th in Lincoln, and John is, I'm getting John and Jack mixed up, so forgive me. John is helping organize this.
Yeah.
So we thought we'd give you a little food for thought, and maybe this group meets once in a while and opens things up for the public to come and listen, and if nothing else, just enjoy. If you don't believe it, it's interesting fiction. Your personal contact, though, I mean, are we talking about a while back, or is this some recent revelation?
Well, it's kind of a strange story. Can I have a little time to explain how it happened?
Well,
here?
I think we could do that first, and then we're going to get to Jack.
Okay.
So don't feel left out.
I won't.
All right.
I was an engineer most of my life in aerospace. I started in the nuclear field, and then I was a builder, home builder, and contractor for about 10 years. Went back into engineering. About 1981, my son-in-law and I said a prayer that we might be able to see a UFO. We were both.
You wanted to see?
Yeah, we were both interested. And about 3 minutes later, one flew right over our heads. And of course, that made me wonder. We weren't shocked. I don't know why, but it made me wonder about how God was connected to UFOs. Well, I didn't see another one for a long time, and then in 1986, all of a sudden, I began to remember experiences that had occurred in my past, and it was just a flood of recollection. The memories came back so fast, I was devastated. And the first witness that I called remembered, which told me that I was not psychotic or that I was having erroneous memories and that sort of thing. Anyway, over a period of time, there have been a few people that have come that remember the same experience as I do, and
that were
have
with
verified
you,
it.
or similar,
Yes,
parallel kinds
that
of-
were with me. One unusual thing about my experiences is that I was never alone during the experiences, except for a few short periods. And for instance, I have a list of about 150 people I knew well that were with me during different times. And as an engineer, this just devastated me because I didn't remember. But I was told during my last experience, which coincidentally occurred in August of 1986, when we had a parting of the ways.
Who had a parting of the ways? You and
The
the
so-called ETs and I began to get angry during the early 1980s when they showed up, and they gave me an option to terminate the experiences, and they said my decision would be final.
Wait a minute, angry? What?
Yes.
That
Well, these are clandestine experiences that occur in real time, in real space, but they program you or hypnotize you some way so that you don't remember. And I can remember forgetting many experiences as they ended. So I was absolutely intrigued with what was going on, and you can imagine how it upset my life. So I began to dig into it and try to understand what had happened. And as a result, an enormous, complex, lengthy story came out when I put all of the bits and pieces of memory together and could come up with a purpose, several purposes and that sort of thing.
they didn't want you to remember?
Actually, during the last experience, they told me that was one of my objections, was that I couldn't remember during the experience or after the experiences, and they said if I remembered, it would negate the purpose of the experiences.
Which would mean they were experimental or explorational on
Well,
their part?
actually, they said they had been around since prehistory. They were active during the ancient Egyptian Empire, during biblical times, and more modern times. And they said they were responsible to a hierarchy and were not allowed to interfere with the affairs of humankind except at certain times in history, when things were going awry or when things were dangerous.
This sounds like Gene Roddenberry or First Contact or something.
Well, my story is somewhat unusual because the beings that I ran into are not the typical little big-eyed grays.
Oh, and they have it with the...
Yeah. They're different, they're what I call the lizard-like beings, and we do, I don't know if you have pictures of them, but
Well,
I
we're
have done
going to
some
show that
pictures.
some stuff in a second. But did you go
okay.
into space?
As far as I know, only once did I travel, and I don't remember. I remember leaving. And I remember returning, but I don't remember. I remember the stars going by the window, and that's the last thing I remember.
Well, you've documented some of these in your own personal way through drawings and some sculptures.
And some
so
writings, yeah.
we'll take a look at some of these and get a feel for them. Should be coming up soon. There we are.
Okay, that was actually the experience that the first witness I called remembered. So he remembered this particular scene.
And this was where?
That was at Chadron State Park in Nebraska, about 1950s. Some of these other drawings are my view of what actually happened. And so far I have about 140 drawings that I've done. And I could do many, many more. I'm doing a manuscript, and I'm doing the drawings for illustrations for the
And
manuscript.
this is a spaceship you saw?
Yes, the little booth there was quite strange, and it actually somehow, and remember I'm an engineer, so I'm not dreaming this up. Somehow that booth came down from out of the saucer, sat on the ground, and then we would hear a voice that would communicate with us, and we would eventually sit inside. And a lot of it had to do with something to do with the American Indians. This particular one is very interesting. The light shone down, and the other boys in the swimming pool could see my bones through my flesh. I looked very weird. They wanted me to see what they were seeing, so another boy took my place, and the light came down on him, and I could see his bones through his flesh.
So you were young?
I was about 7 years old there, yes.
My goodness.
This was sometimes the craft sometimes protected me. The adults at this campground were giving me trouble because they thought I was responsible for the craft to show up. And the craft a small craft came in, and they would swoop down over their heads and try to.
Wait, nobody was scared or screamed or?
Yeah, they were scared. You bet, and I was scared.
Oh, this is more than one
This
craft.
was at Camp Cedars near Fremont, Nebraska, during the Golden Arrow ceremony, and the disc-shaped craft showed up, which always showed up in a flight of 4 or 5, and that's these little guys here on the table.
And we'll look at those in a second.
Okay. This is what I call the saucer booth routine, where the voice would encourage everybody to get into the booth for eternal knowledge and wisdom, and something to do with the Indians and the buffalo. which is very strange.
And here you were sort of emulating an Indian, some traditions
Yes,
at your camp.
I thought that was very, but this happened also throughout the 46 years of experience.
This is more of the...
This would be a typical scene in an evening, you might say.
Sort of a formation?
Yes, this is how they looked when they came in. Now, it's very interesting. Well, I should say something about this. I had simple experiences and more complex experiences, and during the more complex experiences, what seemed to be very ordinary human men dressed in street clothes would walk up to us and start explaining what was going on, and they would also educate us into American history, the Native Americans, and so forth.
And were those are real humans that appeared?
Well, I don't.
As best as you can tell.
Once I saw one of them come walking out of a volume of distorted atmosphere.
And this
Several times my relatives and I were levitated up into a craft. During this particular time, my uncles were reprimanded, you might say, for giving me trouble because of the craft. They would always give me trouble because they thought I was responsible. And I also learned more about the eternal knowledge and wisdom of Indians and Buffalo during that experience.
And these are some of your sculptures.
Yes,
Sculptures based on what you saw and what you remember that you saw.
I thought that people could more readily identify with what I'm talking about if I had three-dimensional sculptures. Yeah.
Wow.
Now, all of these had a certain routine normally that.
That's the booth, the second from the right.
The booth
that,
is the
booth that you go into. And the teepee, which I assume is.
That was always connected to an education about the American Indian or the Native Americans.
Okay. Wow, and that looks like it's sort of igloo or something on the left.
That one was an educational type object. The one on the right was the elongated saucer. Now, I actually, you can believe this or not, went on time travels into the future, and every time this craft showed up, there would be the same human individuals on board. And they would take us into the future at certain locations, primarily in eastern Nebraska, and show us what we were to do in the future.
And what is that?
Well, I need to finish that real quickly. After my recollections in 1987, I actually met those people that I had traveled with during the 1950s time travels. And the information we exchanged verified that we had actually dealt with the same intelligence, and it was verified down to the minute scientific details. This is what I call the coffin, and it was extremely strange, and I would have to take too much time, I think, to explain how it was connected.
Okay, well, we won't go into that. And now
Okay.
all right, we'll come back out here and we'll put you on hold for a
Sure.
second because we come from the personal anecdotal side. Now we're going to go to Dr. Kasher. Now you approached this you've had no personal contact.
No, not
Okay.
really.
All right, just for the record.
Yeah.
But you are an academician, and how did you get, obviously you had a personal interest in this, but how did you marry your interest with getting sort of academically involved from a research point of view?
Well, about 10, 12 years ago, for some reason, I got very interested in UFOs and started reading a lot about them. And of course, as I did that, I always thought about it from my own personal point of view, which is as a scientist. And so I reactivated my membership in the Mutual UFO Network, and I'm now a physics consultant for them. That's a group of 5,000 or 6,000 people internationally dedicated to the scientific study of UFOs.
Well, we're going to get into your video in just a second, but it's really hot right now because of the whole Mars thing.
That's right, yeah. NASA is now taking closer pictures of a region called Cydonia. There were a couple pictures taken in 1976, very far away with 100-meter resolution, so right on the limits of being able to figure out what we're looking at. And it looks like a very large face that may have been crafted by some
pyramids
civilization.
and what they call a fortress and
That's
all
right,
kinds of...
and a city, and it's the arrangement of all the things that are there too that are very interesting. So a lot of really good science has gone into looking at this area and indicating that it's worth taking a look at with better resolution to see if there really is something there.
There was huge disappointment with some recent pictures
That's right.
shot by...
Yeah, NASA was very nice about accommodating us and taking pictures, and the picture of the face has come in now. From a certain angle, it does look like just a natural structure. The jury is still out. I'd like to wait myself until I see all the pictures that they take, but that's certainly the appearance, and they've taken one just a couple days ago of the region of the city. I haven't seen any reaction on that yet.
Now, show me your book for a second, and we'll explain that.
This is the Journal of UFO Studies. It's a refereed academic journal and published, and academicians are encouraged to write articles that pertain to UFOs. And so I analyzed a videotape that was taken from Space Shuttle Discovery, and
we could take a look at that.
We can look at that, and I wrote a 70-page article in this journal indicating that what we're going to see on the video were actually probably spacecraft out in space away from the shuttle and not ice particles close. Now here's the video here, really pretty picture that is being taken from the shuttle. The sky is on the upper left, the Earth is the lower upper right.
What year is this?
This was 1991.
Okay.
And the Earth is the lower left, and you can see several little interesting dots there. And the one in particular that we're going to be interested in is in that yellow circle. It's going to appear pretty soon. And there it is right there. It's going to move up and to the left. There will be a couple flashes on the lower left side of the screen. Apparently in reaction to that, the object will cut back sharply to the right, and if you watch closely, there will be a streak that will come through the region that it has just left.
Okay, watch this. It's fascinating.
The flash, double flash is about to come. There's the double flash. There it goes, and there goes a streak right through. And what you really can't see or notice, because we're looking at a lot of different things here, is that there are some objects on the right that react. There was a second streak that went through on the right. There are probably 6 to 8 different objects that move in a funny fashion and react and accelerate in different directions.
Do we know where above the Earth that allegedly is?
This was down probably off the coast of Australia.
Okay. Okay, here's a little different.
Here's a computer-enhanced close-up of that. In the circle, you're going to have the dot appear and move up to the left, and you'll be able to see the streak really pretty well this time. It's going to see a double flash lower left, and then it'll accelerate back up to the right, and then the streak will go through. There it goes, and there's the streak that went right through where it had been. And I did an analysis of this videotape, and at least to my satisfaction, I presented maybe 5 proofs or more that these objects are not ice particles close to the shuttle. They're actually something out in space away from the shuttle. And by process of elimination, they're not meteors, they're not satellites, and they're not comets, certainly, and space junk. And so really the only viable option is that they're actual spacecraft out in space. They change direction. At times they're clearly above the Earth's atmosphere, and they accelerate. And so that's my definition of spacecraft.
Well, I know you've been called upon nationally to comment on this particular specialty of yours, or this item, and other things. Now, what we bring here is we bring an academician, and we bring someone that's had personal experience, and of course you've talked with many others about their personal experiences. All right, now, as we wind down, there's too much to say. We don't have enough time. But you are not weird, to me.
That's encouraging.
I mean, I get the feeling, and I've heard many people on like the Art Bell show and that, who I wonder, a little bit about them. They'll sound okay for a while, and then they'll sound kind of flippy.
They're gone. Mm-hmm.
Right. But you are normal people, and when people find out that you're interested, I'm sure all kinds of people come out of the woodwork and just jabber to no end about this and that and everything. But you're having meaningful conversations in both the scientific world and the world at large about these things. Are people getting more interested?
I've noticed a big increase in interest. I've been giving UFO talks for 10 or 12 years. When I first started, I just tried to get people to at least be open to the possibility there may be some grain of truth in what I'm talking about. Now, people are right there with me, and I can sense that they're listening and considering it seriously. And after every talk that I give, someone comes up afterwards and tells me about experiences. I gave a talk to non-commissioned officers at Offutt Air Force Base last fall. And I had 1 or 2 of them come up afterwards and tell me their experiences with UFOs. And that happens all the time.
In fact, many military personnel, maybe it's because if there are aliens, if they're attracted to what we're doing from a military or scientific viewpoint, but there are lots of stories. I've had people tell me too that have been in the military, and of course they don't want to say anything.
That's right, they're very careful. And don't get me started, I'll start my 2-hour lecture, but there's a lot I could tell you about Russia, Russian military. They're very open about it in Russia and things that have happened.
I was going to ask that, and there's this alleged conspiracy to keep a cap on it, or at least not be as open, that Area 51 and Roswell and all that, that the Air Force has been keeping a cap on that. Do you feel that's true? You said Russia's more open?
People often ask me whether I believe there's a government cover-up of UFO information. The answer I give is that it's really not a matter of what I believe. There is a government cover-up. It's a matter of court record. There are classified documents that deal with UFOs. Judges have ruled that it would be detrimental to national security to release the information in those documents. So it's not a matter of whether there's a cover-up, it's what being covered up. It's a matter of court record. It's a fact that there is.
I might say that this really hurts people like me because of our credibility. In other words, it's not recognized officially, the personal experiences. So we sort of feel like outcasts. But there are very credible stories, and there are multiple witnesses to a lot of encounters.
What? I keep hearing this. This is detrimental to sort of our congregate sanity. Perhaps and there are other religions besides Judeo-Christian beliefs there, but that it would just set everything absolutely in a tiz, and therefore, culturally, economically, would just fall apart. Maybe I'm just too naive. I don't get it.
I've never been very sympathetic I suppose that could happen. But for example, I'm Catholic, and I've discussed this with priests and a lot of different people. To me, it would show God's grandeur much, much more deeply if there's intelligent life all over the universe, and if they're here too. I mean, there's no conflict with religion for me at all.
As a matter of fact, I think it supports the Bible, for instance. I can state very confidently that what I experienced is described almost perfectly in the Bible from Genesis through Revelations, and that particularly is the phenomena, the clouds of fog, that sort of thing, the voice coming from a source that you can't see, and so forth. It's a fascinating subject, and as an engineer, I'm extremely interested in the phenomena. I think it's time we get on and try to understand what's actually taking place.
We have oftentimes throughout, when we look at history, we try to understand the commonality in religions. We try to understand why pyramids were constructed in so many places of the world with other diversities in their culture. And UFOs and alien visitations have been used as possible explanations. Is there other academic research going on? How can we academically research things that happened before our history? We can't carbon date whether or not there was an alien here.
Yeah, that's a tough question. That's a little bit out of my field, but
right.
I think there are two different points of view. You try to prove what you can scientifically, but that does not mean that the other point of view is wrong. It may mean that science is not capable of measuring it. So you have to keep that. I mean, there's been no science, as far as I know, that's measured what John has experienced. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just may mean that we're not capable of measuring that.
I think, don't we have some scientific, somewhat scientific ways of measuring whether you were hallucinating, whether I know that lie detectors aren't always accurate. You can take beta blockers and screw up a lie detector.
Well, I've been through all the tests, psychological tests, and I am not imaginative. I'm a normal.
You're an engineer, no?
Average person,
Just kidding.
So that's about as far as we can go. I do believe that we can, if we pay attention to exactly what happens during the experiences. For instance, a lot of times when the craft showed up, it manifested out of thin air, a distorted atmosphere, a light blue haze, or a dense gray fog. And I think you saw on the videotape that the objects all of a sudden appeared. Now, this indicates to me that it's other dimensional or a dimensional overlap with
or
our
a parallel
dimension.
dimension, or I mean, we don't have
But-
even words to describe
That's
any
all
of this.
acceptable from a physics point of view. Again, not proven, but acceptable.
If we pay attention to the colors, for instance, how the atmosphere behaves during these manifestations, I believe that we can come close to maybe trying to understand a little more fully what's actually happening. And this will lead us into some new areas in physics, in science, chemistry also.
You talked about feeling like an outcast, and maybe even, I don't even know how academically you feel by, do you feel at all outcast? Let's say at UNO, within the UNL system, within the...
I get a little static, but for the most part, it's very positive. For example, I give UFO talks a lot around town, Kiwanis and whatever. And my dean has actually introduced me twice when I gave a couple of those talks. And I'm amazed at how many Kiwanis and types of group they have on every block. But
Oh, yes, they do.
I know. But, and then even in the UNO community, I have people come up and tell me, I've had faculty come up and tell me, one faculty member told me that when he was 12, he was out in the backyard with his parents and they saw a saucer. And the father was an engineer, and he has been trying to figure out how the thing could fly ever since then. And so, and that's not the only person in the UNO community that has told me about their experiences too.
At least there is not an effort, and I don't know if this was in the past or just my perceived, or I read too much fiction, that people like you, Pete, that sounds like people like you,
That's okay.
are not being stifled particularly.
No, but the subject is really not open to discussion in the public arena. For instance, you won't find too many people in interviews like this that would talk about time travel. That, you know, that's something very bizarre, and most scientists would say, well, that fella is crazy. I mean, he just thought he did, you know. So we have to establish that this phenomenon is real, and that has to come through people like Jack in the science. And then when that's finally accepted by the general public, we can get into some of the more meaningful things, which actually have to do with our culture and the steering of our culture through individuals such as myself.
Well, we've run out of time, but you might have a chance to talk to individuals such as himself at the UFO Contacting You Open Forum, which is a Saturday, April 25th, 7 to 10 o'clock in Lincoln at the Comfort Suites. And there's a phone number here, or you can call us here at KYNE, and they'd be glad to give you the number. Gentlemen, thank you. You're very normal. I always thought you would be. And I want to thank you for joining us, at least starting a discussion that this isn't something that's on the weird shows and Star Trek and First Contact, that to you it is alive and well and happening
That's right.
here.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much, John and Jack.
You bet.
And thank you for joining us today on Consider This.